What is happening internet? J Gamer Dude here, and I'm going to be doing a review of a PS2 game, Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. Now, this game came out in 2001, and is basically the first Crash game to come out after Naughty Dog stopped working on the franchise altogether. So basically, here are my credentials. Basically, I'm 85% completed of the game, basically 25 crystals, 25 relics, and 30 gems overall, so hopefully that will clear my gaming credentials. So with all of that being said, let's actually talk about the game. So basically, Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex is a Crash 3 clone, basically taking the warp room concept that was first introduced in Crash 2, but taking the exact same design as the one in Crash 3. Basically, you have 5 levels per warp room, 5 warp rooms in total, and each 5 levels is then followed up by a boss. Now, the thing that the Wrath of Cortex has got going on for it is that the bosses are basically themed after 5 elemental masks, not to be confused with the fact that Crash 4 does this very similar thing where you've got not necessarily elemental masks, but masks with different powers. So I feel like in some ways this game may have been a precursor to the idea of what Crash 4 ended up becoming. But basically, each warp room thing, whatever you want to call it, warp room pad, let's say, does feature a level at the end. So the 5th level is usually an elemental representation of the theme for the warp room. So the first warp room is basically taking on earth. The second warp room is water. The third warp room is fire. The 4th warp room is air. And final warp room is... What is the final warp room anyway? Like, I've just completely lost track now at this point. But yeah, basically those are the masks, those are the elements for each of the warp rooms, and I'm like, okay, this seems like a pretty cool design, but the problem with this game is that the game looks awful. I don't know if you've noticed that. The game doesn't look particularly good. Another thing that you may also notice is that whenever you enter or exit levels, there's a loading screen. Keeping in mind that Crash games up until now have never actually had a loading screen. You just, the screen just goes blank for a few seconds, and then eventually you might, it'll just pop up with a level like 9 to 10 seconds later. Now there's something that this game is completely infested with, and that is vehicle stages. This game has way too many vehicle stages, and in fact, Crash did have vehicle stages in the past. I mean, keeping in mind that Crash 3 had a lot of them. You had stuff like Crash on the bike, you had Crash in a helicopter, you had Coco on a helicopter. Hell, you had Coco riding Pyrrha in some levels as well. But for some reason, the levels in this game are absolutely awful when it comes to vehicle stages. Vehicle segments in levels in this game also suck as well. Basically, the idea is that not only are there entire vehicle stages, but there are also segments of stages that have vehicles in them. Say, for example, we take this, I don't even know what the heck you call this. This plane that flaps its wings, I guess, maybe, who knows? It hurts the actual game's... Well, not even the game, this level design of this level as a whole, because you have to hold down the fire button in order to fire the thing to destroy these boats. But the big problem with that is, why could we have just not gotten the actual plane from the second level in this game, which is called Tornado Alley? Basically, it's very similar to the biplanes in Crash 3 as an example. I think that would have made a way better vehicle stage, because for some reason this vehicle just completely appears only one time and never appears again for the remainder of the game. Yeah, this vehicle only ever appears once, and a lot of vehicles only ever appear once in the entire game as well. As much as I want to be able to also explain the game story doesn't make any bloody sense either, if I'm being completely honest, because I didn't really follow along with it and just basically skipped all the cutscenes. And I don't know if you've noticed, but also in Crash 3, bosses say some pretty menacing things as you complete each of the levels in each of the warp rooms. The bosses in this game don't do that. In fact, well, they do that. They do actually talk some smack and then disappear. But the thing is that they say some really they're just annoying. They don't seem all that annoying. Well, yeah, they're basically just annoying. That's all that they are. They don't really serve any purpose when they do appear and say things. They just say some really bad jokes and then just disappear outright. But yeah, I guess something that is different here than compared to the first 3 Crash games is that Coco is now a playable character. But the important thing to keep in mind with Coco is that her moveset is completely different than Crash, where she basically does this like kick with the square button, does a low kick with the circle button, jumps only once even if you have the double jump power up for beating the second boss. And beyond that, feels like a lesser than version of Crash. Her moveset is just incredibly limited and doesn't really help, and in fact hurts a lot of the levels that she appears in. And there is no place more easier to show this than, so there's a level called the Gauntlet. Level 11 in this game is called the Gauntlet. You play it as Crash. Now the thing about it is that there is actually a level in the secret warp room, level 26, called Nighttime, and that level Nighttime is basically just the it's just level 11 all over again. So basically it's just a Crash level, but you play as Coco instead, and it really does show off just how weak Coco's movements are and how she basically functions comparatively to that of Crash, and how her levels just seem very much lesser than because of her incredibly limited moveset as a platforming character basically. And honestly, like, I wish that like Coco and Crash shared the same moveset, because if they did that, at least the game would be a hell of a lot better in comparison. And some of the worst levels in the game appear in the secret warp room. Basically, in order to access levels in the secret warp room, of which there are 5, you'll need to get 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25 relics in the game in order to unlock them. And for the absolute pleasure of being able to go through the entire game and get all of these nonsensically annoying and yet somewhat difficult at times sapphire relics in the game, you get treated to some of the worst levels in the game. Like I mentioned before, Nighttime level 26 is basically just a Coco level, taking a Crash level and chucking Coco into it, and it not making all that much sense, but just showing us that Coco's moveset is worse than Crash's as a whole. Ghost Town, a level that requires 10 sapphire relics and is easily in contention to be one of the worst levels in the game because you don't have to do anything to win the level. Ice Station Bandicoot, which is I guess a fine level all things considered, but certainly isn't worth getting 15 sapphire relics. Solar Bowler is actually the best level in the game, well, one of the best levels in the game I should say, and easily the best level in this entire warp room. Is it worth the 20 sapphire relics? Well, you tell me. I would say so, but for 25 sapphire relics, Force of Nature is also one of the 3 levels in contention to be one of the worst levels in this game, and also requires a solid 25 sapphire relics in order to even unlock. And some of the stronger levels in the game appear in Warp Room 4 and Warp Room 5 to be more precise. And just to kind of show off some of the themes, here we have the Earth theme with Warp Room 1, Warp Room 2 had a water theme, Warp Room 3 had the fire theme, and Warp Room 4 had the ice, well not ice, it's an air theme, but you know, they kind of use ice as a way of being able to show the whole aspect. Though with that being said, I'd argue that this is probably the best boss fight in the game. Atmospheric Pressure is easily the best boss fight in the game and takes notes from the engine boss fight from Crash 3. And ultimately, some of the stronger levels in the game are in this final warp room, such as Gold Rush, Crate Balls of Fire, Cortex, Vortex, and stuff like level 20, for example. Weathering Heights is a very good level. You know, you've got different levels. Coral Canyon, I think, is one of the worst levels in the game. Crash Droids is a very strong level. Droid Void, Avalanche, like, yeah, some of the good stuff is closer to the end of the level, so it does require a bit of effort. But the effort required in the Secret Warp Room is not worth it unless you play up to Solar Bowler, which is easily the best, one of the best levels in my opinion, and easily the best level in the Secret Warp Room. And as far as bosses go, Drain Damage, which is the second boss in the game, is easily one of the worst, if not the worst boss fight. Rumble in the Rocks is equal parts annoying as it is frustrating for no reason. Crashes to Ashes is a fine level. It just takes is a fine boss fight. It just takes a bit of getting used to. And the final boss fight, while it combines all of the elemental masks used put together, it feels kind of weak as a boss fight overall, because you're fighting against both Cortex and Crunch at the same time. And keeping in mind that Crunch is the major villain in this game for the most part, and is largely being controlled by Cortex, and then eventually Cortex just kind of lets him go because of the secret ending that you get, which is definitely not worth it in any way, shape or form. And so I think, if nothing else, this game is basically an extremely polarizing game. A lot of the levels are really good, and a lot of the levels are really bad. And a lot of the things that this game does incredibly poorly is largely to do with level design, some of the control aspects, and depth perception. I think that this game's depth perception hurts it the most, because just when you think you're making a good jump, and thinking, oh yeah, I'll absolutely be able to make this jump, and then you just end up falling short, sucks. It really does hurt to know that you misjudged a jump here and there, or the fact that when you tried to make a jump and realized, oh, it's actually impossible to make that jump completely, even though it seemed like it was possible from like your hand-eye coordination point of view. So at the end of the day, this game is not particularly bad, but not particularly good either. It's such a milquetoast take to have, I'm sure, but this game is very much the 5 out of 10 that it deserves. It is a 5 out of 10 in my opinion. I think that it is such a meh game, and it just, unfortunately, if you compare it to the previous Crash games, comes up extraordinarily short by comparison. Crash 1 is a good game. Crash 2 is a great, if not excellent game, depending on who you ask. And Crash 3 is a great, if not excellent game, again, depending on who you ask. Some people might say that 2 is better than 3. Others are going to say that 3 is better than 2. I'm one of those people. This is easily worse than all of those games. Somehow this game looks worse than the original Crash game. I don't know how. This game is on the PS2. The original Crash game was on PS1. Make it make sense to me. But yeah, Traveler's Tales did not do themselves a favor when they developed this game after Naughty Dog basically made some of the best Crash games of all time with Crash 2 and Crash 3. And some might argue that now with Crash 4 out in the wild, that people are actually going to like that game a hell of a lot more. And honestly, it is easily the strongest Crash game. And honestly, in 2025, it is easily, I can easily recommend that no one should ever have to play Crash the Wrath of Cortex ever again, because the game just is not worth playing in any way, shape or form now in this modern era where we've got the Crash trilogy in the form of the Insane trilogy, and also the fact that we've got Crash 4 alongside Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. I feel like a lot of games in Crash's history are not worth playing anymore, largely because of the fact that other games are so much better, and this game certainly doesn't feel all that modern, given the fact that it did come out back in 2001, and doesn't really hold up all that well, all things considered. But with all of that being said, however, let me know what you guys think about Crash the Wrath of Cortex. Did you guys play it originally when it came out in 2001? Did you rediscover it like how I only just did recently, and then playing it on stream just to kind of, you know, show my support for the Bandicoot. But also, I guess, covering the blind sides of my gaming history in that sense. But with all that being said, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year. And with all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.